Tawnytown Planning and Zoning Committee, please come to order. Would you stand to the pledge of the flag, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Had to get up quick that time.
Yeah. Tell George to slow down a little bit. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. Let the records reflect the members that's present, and also I'd like to welcome our new member to the commission, Dale Hale. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Commission members should have received the draft minutes, September 24th, 2018. Is there any correction or additions to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain.
So move.
I move it be accepted.
Okay, second by Ollie. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, thank you. Delegations and action items. On this evening tonight, we got Tim Thomas, planning considerations for a Royal Perfect. Jim, you want to start us off on that?
Sure. Once work began at Meads Crossing, it generated a lot of interest from the surrounding community, folks off Angel Road and Route 194 as well. A lot of phone calls came into the city office and the county as well. So a lot of folks were very surprised. They weren't aware that the property, I guess, had been annexed into the city about 20-some years ago and was subject of the development plan more recently within the last 10 years. Mr. Thomas has kind of taken a bit of a lead on this with talking with some of the neighbors and folks in the community and making inquiries both here and at the county. And he would like to present some planning considerations, some ideas and things that we can think about going forward for future phases of Meads Crossing as they relate to the surrounding rural areas, and also should we have another community like this where it borders the non-incorporated area, some things to think about from a different perspective. I understand that some residents have also put together a petition of things that they would like to see for future phases of Meads, and I'm sure we'll be seeing that tonight this evening as well. And I'll let Mr. Thomas have the podium.
Thank you. Before you start, Mr. Thomas, I'd like to mention to everyone that we meet every month on the last Monday of the month at 7:30, and it's open to the public, and we entertain for you folks to come out and express your concerns and tell us anything you like about our planning, our plans down the road, what we're doing present. The agenda is always posted out front, so you're welcome, and we'd like to hear your voice. So with that, would you go ahead?
Okay.
Take the mic.
Yeah, I will.
I'm going to hand these out. This isn't really pertinent to read before I start, but I figured I'd give you a copy of this petition. And I left one for the mayor with the signatures of people that are in support of this. But I'll give you something after I'm done to kind of reflect that.
When you start, would you go to the mic?
I
And
will.
thank you.
Thank you.
See how this picks up. Is this okay from this distance?
Yes.
So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. So as Jim mentioned, I've approached him actually in a couple different meetings over the last 6 months or so. And I'm here really tonight for two reasons. And the rural and agricultural community that surrounds Mead Crossing wants to first bring to the council's attention changes we would like to see made as the final approval for phase 2 is brought before you. And even though the timing of this initiation of this next phase is not really known yet, and really based on what happens in phase 1, we thought as a community that if we were proactive about this, that as much as we could be, and begin this conversation now, it would just really better ensure a positive outcome. And also we realize that perhaps some of these discussions would have been more productive and beneficial earlier in this project's design, as Jim, as you suggest, as this has been an open forum for a while. And we have regrets that we weren't able to fully avail ourselves of these opportunities. But so nonetheless, we're here now, and with a desire to make further contributions to the outcome that we believe will serve to more appropriately integrate Meads Crossing into the existing community, which is here behind me tonight. So the second purpose for this presentation, and I think Jim really helped me with that in terms of my conversations with him, and as the city of Tawnytown really grows within its projected growth areas, these same land use challenges are going to occur and resurface, and particularly as demonstrated by this current project where disparate and potentially incompatible land uses are saddled up beside one another. In particular, if you look at the map here, and this is where an R10,000 zone abuts an ag preservation district. And so this is just really different. And when talking with Deb Bowers in the County Ag Preservation Office, this is the first time in the county, at least from her recollection, that this has occurred. So it really sets a precedent, not only in this jurisdiction, but over the county as the towns, not just Tawnytown, but other growth boundaries expand, and that these two land uses are found side by side. So it is our wish that the dialogue that, at least as a group, that we bring here tonight will really continue, both among you all as in the planning seats, and also with you and the town council and publicly. By carefully examining and discussing the issues that Meads Crossing presents, it is our hope that the outcome can positively influence further development within the town and along its borders. So my own inquiry began after driving down Angel Road, and as Jim mentioned, not really being aware of what was happening until I really saw the earth-moving equipment there, parked alongside the road. Even though I knew then that this impending neighborhood change must have been in the planning stage for quite some time, and that there must have been times for public participation, for whatever reason I was out of the loop. It was even more incredulous to learn, and particularly since I pride myself on being a bit attentive to things, that there had been a public hearing sign posted on the property, and I had driven by it countless times. Once sort of my initial shock dropped away, I decided to educate myself and share what I have learned with my neighbors and now with you all. In the last few months, I've spent many hours talking to people that are involved and impacted by Meads Crossing. And this list begins with, most importantly, my neighbors. I've also spoken with the mayor and with Jim Leiprecht, as I mentioned, with Pete Newman, who's with the fire department, Clay Black, John Breeding, Barbara Moser, and Clay Stewart, all with the county planning office and the planning review aspect of that office. Deb Bowers, as I mentioned, with the county ag preservation, Chris Lanachin, who's the county traffic engineer, John O'Mealy, Mike Hardesty, with the County Board of Ed Transportation Services, Mark Healy, who's a traffic engineer with Traffic Concepts, who was a lead engineer with the traffic study that you all authorized, and with Steve Smith, generously met with me for a few times, and also Henry Johnson from Ryan Homes, and Isaac Manash, who's a local attorney specializing in zoning and land use issues. So I tried to do my homework just because I felt that I didn't know a whole lot. I have a background in civil engineering along with my more current acupuncture practice, which is kind of a weird combination. So I have some experience with land use, with architecture, and engineering practices, but I thought it would be helpful to be able to talk to all these players and try to just get a sense of this process. So everyone involved in a project of this magnitude, the council, planning commission, the county and state, the developer, and the existing communities inside and outside the town's border, all have their own priorities or some particular stake in the outcome. The planning commission's responsibility is to balance all of these complexities, guided by the vision put forth in the comprehensive plan sort of the town's Bible. This vision set forth in the comprehensive plan is enacted through the zoning ordinances. And these ordinances are not intended as just minimal compliance standards, but rather provide the structure to make the vision real and to give this vision form. This particular project, as all developments, when they're being built, are not isolated and are not to be considered just what happens within the borders of this community. The land itself around this property has a history and a context in a much broader community. While it is agricultural land, it arises out of an existing ecological community of meadow and stream. And while its use is being changed and modified to fit into the vision of the town of Tawnytown, we cannot forget that it sits within and is contained by a much larger existing rural ag area with its own history, people, ideas, and ecology. I am assuming over the last few years, as you have been faced with decisions regarding the shaping of this project, you have heard mostly from points of view that shape the internal aspects of the project. That is, what will happen within the property boundaries of Meads Crossing. This information can include questions of housing densities and site engineering, for example. These voices are often the loudest as they represent the practical aspect, the nuts and bolts of building a new community. These points of view are not bad, they just represent a particular vision and reflect certain priorities. In my presentation tonight, I wish to speak for the existing community and to open up what we believe is a myopic vision so that you will have the chance to learn more about us, our priorities, and how our lives will be changed by the decisions you have made and the priorities that you have emphasized. Our hope is that this conversation initiates several dialogues. Obviously, we desire an ongoing conversation with us, this group, as we ask for considerations of our point of view as you review phase 2 of this project in the near future. But perhaps even more importantly, with this dialogue that starts tonight, can we raise a level of awareness within the town and planning commission of the importance of innovative, creative, and respectful design? These types of design considerations we are proposing can greatly assist in smoothing the process of integrating a new neighborhood into the fabric of the existing community. I know that each of you are deeply committed to the well-being of this town, or you wouldn't be sitting here. I can only imagine how each of you hope to contribute to the continued growth here that is fiscally responsible and creates opportunity for folks that live here in an aesthetically beautiful environment. Simply put, you want to create a nice place to live and work. The type of decisions the council and commission have responsibility for have an immense potential to affect the quality of life of thousands of people for decades to come. These decisions range from the largest perspective, from how a particular piece of property will be used as you consider zoning and general land use practices, to much smaller details of community lifestyle, such as how parked cars affect the livability of a community, and landscaping choices, things like that that really happen on a much smaller scale. Through design choices, your decisions can affect how often residents need their cars, where they can walk safely, and how they connect to their neighbors. If you choose to develop sensitivity to these issues and look carefully at the process you are engaged in, your positive impact ripples through the landscape and community for a long time to come. In terms of looking at community growth patterns, World War II marks the end of a time when more local forces shaped the look and character of a town. Community growth typically happened more slowly, was overseen by people that lived and worked within the community, and reflected historical, architectural, and neighborhood patterns. This quote I want to share from you is from your own comprehensive plan in the section entitled Historic Development Patterns, and offers insight into the issues I am presenting tonight. So this quote reads, "While growth from the last quarter of the 19th century and beyond may have blurred a few of these traditional tenets, meaning architectural and neighborhood building patterns. The vast majority of the core developed areas of Tawnytown have continued to reinforce the elements of this fundamental scheme to an exceptionally high degree. Further, the physical growth of the city can be traced by a study of the architectural clusters and the formation of the block patterns from the traditional front street and back alley plan populated by vernacular-based tri-gable houses through the ranges of Victorian-era revivals and national architectural trends into the first decades of the 20th century. Only in the decades following World War II was the impulse for streets to break away from the grid plan fully realized. This same era, meaning post-World War II, saw the cycle of building design also move away from the traditions of local roots and towards a functional, affordable mode that responded to market rather than community, context, or location. This last section makes a critical point, and for me is really crucial to understand sort of where we've been and where we're heading. And so I just want to repeat this. I've changed a few of the words to really emphasize, I think, from a historical place, a way to view how development has proceeded really in the last 50 or 60 years. So the cycle of building and community design moves away from the traditions of local roots and towards a functional, affordable mode that responds to market rather than community, context, or location. So I believe this trend of moving away from local roots was also exacerbated by outside development companies purchasing land in communities that they did not live in, and therefore often had no stake in the outcome besides the profitability. As the above summary suggests, traditional building trends in the community were overridden or ignored based on the regional marketing perspectives of the developer. For me, an obvious question arises, as it is at the heart of the issues we are addressing tonight. What happens to a community over time when the patterns of growth within the community are superseded by market factors, rather than based on historical context and location of this community? Well, I believe that the community solutions created solely from this marketability perspective can provide adequate, affordable housing. Have we somehow lost the heart and soul of the town when this is the primary driving vision? It is not hard to see then that when the town's growth is not firmly rooted in the context of its own history and location, that the surrounding community will suffer the consequences as well. From reading your comprehensive plan, I know that the town has hoped to address some of these themes around the changes over the last 50 or 60 years that I'm addressing now. And what I noticed in your comprehensive plan, that you try to address this through your general goals that are in the plan, the zoning ordinances arising from these goals, and by the creation of the community village concept in particular. The Meads Crossing plan was approved by the mayor and council to be developed under the community village concept and the zoning guidelines that apply to this concept. So I want to look at for a moment at these particular comprehensive plan provisions now and use Meads Crossing as an example to see the relationship between the town's vision and the reality of what is now being constructed. So in the broadest picture, Meads Crossing is bordered by the existing neighborhood of Meadowbrook on the southwest, which as you can see is on the town side. And an industrial business and a residential zone to the north, which would be on the side of 194. An ag zones, which is a Brower Farm, to the northeast, and the south, which would be also across the Run on Angel Road, which is the current Nest property. So you can see that there's kind of a whole host of zoning factors surrounding the development. And as I mentioned before, according to Deb Bowers, who is the current Ag Preservation Director, this is the first time in the county that this land use scenario has occurred. And this situation is where an ag preservation farm meets a dense, more urban residential zone. And in this case, we're talking about an R10,000 designation. And as you can see from the site plan, about 10 lots in Phase 2, which are the lots that'll be bordering the Brower property. And again, I'm not to point to the plan, I'm sure you are familiar, but you'll see those lots directly abut the property line there. So if we were to look at zoning practices within the town limits that you all are already familiar with, we would see decisions have been made on what is believed to be compatible uses. And you might say it's common sense that you wouldn't put like a hospital that requires quiet next to a welding shop or things like that. And most people would agree that there are uses that if they're not compatible, there needs to be some buffering effect between uses even within the town, that those uses on those properties might have some sort of disturbances for the neighbors. So, as I said, if there were issues of incompatibility even within the town, you would find ordinances related to transitional areas or buffers that would offer protection from these uses that aren't so compatible. So in this case of this development, we don't really see any attempts at moderating this transition between zones that you could argue, if you look at the practices of a dairy farm and a residential development, that there could be issues on both sides of the fence, literally and figuratively. So as I said, if we look at the dairy farm and this dense residential zone, an appropriate transitional buffer would help mitigate the potential of farm annoyances affecting the city residents, and the farmer would not be compelled to move farm operations back from his own property line as a precautionary measure. To avoid these conflicts, the farmer will most likely take his own land out of production, and this loss of acreage in production will adversely affect crop size, yield, and revenue. I'm reminded of the famous line in the poem Mending Walls by Robert Frost. In the yearly spring ritual of walking the boundary line between their properties and inspecting for winter breaches in their wall that divides them, the neighbor reminds Frost of how good fences make good neighbors. Interestingly enough, within your own comprehensive plan, there are references that suggest and require the use of buffers in this exact situation. So in your general goal section of your comprehensive plan, there's one objective that reads, ensure that development plans are sensitive to the existing physical and man-made environment by considering hydrologic and soil characteristics, topography, existing uses of the land, availability of public facilities, and accessibility. And a recommendation from this 2010 plan reads, rather than a definable urban boundary, the city envisions a transitional approach between the downtown urban area and the rural land outside of the growth area boundary. So here again, if you use this as an example, what you see is a very abrupt transition between this residential zone and the rural land that it adjoins. So partly, again, within the village code suggestion is that there's kind of a gentle transition between this community village concept and between these kind of transitional areas. And so lastly, from your own zoning ordinances, and this is section 187B, whenever a residential subdivision abuts a non-residential subdivision, use, or undeveloped land not located in a residential district, a permanently landscaped buffer strip of at least 20 feet in width shall be provided. So as you can hear, your own comprehensive plan and zoning requirements support a different outcome than this site plan provides for. So a letter was sent back in 1995 from the State of Maryland Land Preservation Foundation to the city of Tawnytown when the Bollinger property was being considered for annexation. And I've included a copy of that letter in the petition. The recommendations of the foundation echo the sentiments of the then director of the Carroll County Ag Program, Bill Powell, regarding the property and the potential future conflicts with residential development and ag practices. The foundation recommended, and I quote from this letter, a buffer zone of at least 50 feet of trees, fence, or living hedge of the property being annexed to protect the development area as well as the agricultural area of Tawnytown. Mr. Powell, at that time, the acting director of the Ag Preservation Office, recommended in his letter, which I've also included in that petition, to the County Ag Preservation Board, and I quote him, I suggest that Tawnytown be asked to require a wooded buffer of 100 feet in width as a condition of subdivision approval of a residential development adjacent to the Ag Preservation easement property that is being used as an intensive dairy operation. A buffer of this nature would insulate city residents from potential farm nuisances, and the farm operator would not be compelled to move farm operations from his own property line as a precautionary measure. So to further examine the impact of Meads Crossing on the rural community it borders, and to aid us together in looking for design solutions that create a more equitable balance between the needs of the city and rural communities, we can look at a summary of the county's Ag Preservation Program. And their website reads, the County Ag Preservation Program seeks, and I quote, to serve the farming community by ensuring a future supply of productive land, by limiting automobile traffic that would be generated by new residential communities, by ensuring a future for living the rural way of life, and through easement purchases by spurring capital investment in Carroll's ag industry. As a part of this rural community and in support of the stated goals of the Ag Preservation Program, we ask the Commission to reconsider the ingress-egress of Crimson Avenue to Angel Road. Now, this is the road that moves through Meadow Brook now and is continued through the development. And in phase 2, there's a proposed exit entrance that would end on Angel Road. In looking at existing traffic patterns for commuters into Westminster and Baltimore from the Meads Crossing area, we believe residents will choose to avoid the intersection at 194 and 140, as well as the 3 traffic signals through town, and instead to travel south on Angel Road and cut through Deal Road to eventually emerge at the traffic signal on Mayberry Road and 140. Google Maps currently indicates that this Royal route is the fastest route from the current construction entrance, which is at the future exit there onto Angel Road at Meads Crossing, for people that would be traveling to Westminster and eventually into Baltimore. So we believe, since there are already 2 planned exits from Meads Crossing that will exit directly onto Route 194, one of these at Caneen Street intersection, which is presently available, and the second is a proposed new entrance within the development called Meads Avenue. And if emergency vehicle access is the argument against our plan, we request that this exit be used for emergency vehicles only. Now, interestingly enough, this concession, if you choose to make it, that we are asking for will also remove the obligation and cost for the town of maintaining a section of Angel Road that the county requested of you back in 1995 at the time of the Bollinger property annexation. A letter was written from the County Bureau of Roads operation and sent to Barbara Moser at the County Planning Office requiring the city of Tawnytown, and I quote, to assume maintenance of Angel Road from Maryland Route 94 to the limit of the town's annexation. So at least we're trying to figure out ways that it's kind of a mutual benefit to look at these options and consider perhaps a different outcome to that entrance and exit. As I mentioned earlier, your own comprehensive plan calls for the creation of buffers or open space to soften the edge of the urban and rural boundary. When looking at the Meads Crossing site plan, we have pointed out the lack of transitional buffers to the surrounding countryside. The other design element that reinforces this lack of transition is the placement of the highest density housing, meaning the townhomes, towards the ag zone on the northeast corner of the site plan, rather than next to the adjacent higher density community of Meadowbrook. So if you look at the plan and you're familiar with the plan, the townhomes have been placed all the way over on that northeast corner. I think there's a little bit of a buffer there, and there's also a proposed dog park and another public space there. But in general, looking at the plan, and it's sort of ironic that, from our standpoint, that the existing town can really support, those higher densities already. So it seemed really unusual to push the townhouses out almost to that transitional point. As I said, it just reinforces this very abrupt transition into the rural community. So, we also realized that those townhomes have already been approved in phase 1. So we can't really do anything at this point in time, but we hope that in really bringing this to your attention, and if you look at your master plan and you look at the projected growth areas, particularly on the north side of 194, that you face the same issue, probably most predominantly in that area where existing farms in the Ag Preservation Program are going to be adjoining places in your projected growth area. So when you look at future plans and you look at ways to create these transitions through the design process, this might be something to consider as you look at density, housing types, and things like that with future projects. So lastly, in reviewing the guidelines for the community village designation as it applies to Mead Crossings, we have found very little evidence of its implementation in the overall site plan in terms of a variety of land uses and housing types and use of open space as directed by the regulations within the community village designation. When I was reviewing the minutes of a few of the past commission meetings, most of the discussions I found focused on details of housing design. And as far as I could tell, it was trying to make the housing designs appear in a more traditional way, which I think is really good. And also I think perhaps your perspective was if those houses look more traditional, they might kind of meet the requirements from a design standpoint of this community village. But the community village really outlines a much broader perspective of looking at how to incorporate businesses, residents, and things like that that mimic the zoning in the town and have that really be applied to developments outside of the downtown area. So without knowing the negotiation process between the town and the developer, which would be reflected in the developer rights and responsibilities agreement, it's difficult to know what concessions were made by the town that possibly undermine the original intention of the community village concept. Nonetheless, the developer was given higher housing densities than the standard lower densities based on, and I quote from the comprehensive plan, conventional minimal lot and yard requirements with strict separation of land uses and housing types. So in closing, so as a group, we are aware that any community of people responding to a drastic change in their neighborhood often quickly become labeled as NIMBYs, which is a not in my backyard designation, and dismissed as people that block progress or are simply opposed to any change. And so we ask that you be sensitive to the fact that with contemporary construction capabilities, that our basic relationship to the horizon can be altered as massive amounts of earth are moved and landscapes obliterated in just a few days. For many residents, and some of them have been here tonight, of this rural community, this relationship to the land and the view is in their bones, as generations of families living on the same property have walked and worked these fields and gazed out over the rural landscape. And there would not be an ag preservation program without the societal recognition of the innate value to the entire community in maintaining and preserving a rural way of life. We ask that as you implement change in the built environment, that you stay true to the town's original character and learn how to apply those traditional patterns to contemporary projects. And is there a willingness to turn to jurisdictions here and even abroad for land use guidance from experts in communities that have faced these same issues decades ago, so that you as a town are not isolated and overwhelmed at this stage of the town's growth? Are there new paradigms to embrace that outline opportunities for creating town revenue that are not dependent on adding new households to the tax base? And perhaps, most importantly, as each of you gaze around the town, are you happy with the results that your planning practices have engendered? It is not hard to predict what the town will look like as it continues to grow, as your comprehensive plan has very specific ideas and dictates the form of this growth. What will change, but predictably, is the next wave of stores that will arrive based on the town's changing demographics. You just need to travel a few miles down the road, perhaps to Westminster, to see an example of what the town will become in not so many years, and maybe travel a few more miles down the road to get an even better view of your own future. Is the direction you see played out in these other communities the vision you have for your community that you are a part of and some degree responsible for? So I hope that my presentation has helped continue an ongoing dialogue about the issues that I've raised, and I know the issues you all have been dealing with for at least since 2007, not before. And I also hope it opens up innovative and creative ways for you really to be in support of the communities that you serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, too. Before I open it up for the commission here, is there anyone else from the floor that would like to come and make any comments? If you do, please state your name and your address.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm Don Brower. We're the farm pretty much that's in question. I, kind of was under the impression that the letter that was introduced in 1995 would have been followed through by the town, and apparently I had talked to Steve Smith, and he was totally unaware that there was even a letter drafted. So we're currently in negotiations, and hopefully we'll come to a mutual agreement of some sort with a buffer. This also comes to play in Meadowbrook. Meadowbrook's finishing up their last section. That also joins our property in the back. So, excuse me. So basically what I'm hoping is that the city and town council, the planning commission, will back us in coming to a conclusion that's agreeable to everybody. Obviously I'm not in favor of housing, but I realize it's part of the growth. Things happen and we move on, but we've been a dairy farm there for over 100 years on 4th generation. The way things go on may be the last, but nevertheless, we're still there, and there's things that will happen between town people, fireworks coming across our fields. That happens all the time in Meadowbrook. So that, those kind of things are not good for animals. They run all over the place. It's very upsetting. And, horns going off the middle of the night. And then also on our half, there's animals that, make noise. There's smells. There's other things that go on. So I'm just hoping that, like I say again, the city and the planning commission back us and between us and everybody that we can come to a conclusion that's somewhat favorable. I know the access, the egress and whatnot on Angel Road is concerning. I do agree that maybe if it's possible that it could be used for emergency situations. I realize there's a lot of houses that, if they're all built, could be a situation where fire trucks couldn't get to or whatever. But then again, like I say, I'm just hoping that the town and everybody backs us with whatever comes down. So.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Got one behind you.
My name is Joe Gimbetti. I live at 4227 Deal Road. I just wanted to say something about the safety issue of Deal Road. I've lived here for 18 years. I've either ran that road, jogged it, biked it, hiked it, you name it, and most of my neighbors could attest to that at least once or twice a week. So I'm pretty familiar with the road, both the east side and the other side. Altogether, it's probably 3 miles of all dirt road. And Angel almost intersects it at 2/3 of the way. But the issue with Deal Road right now, being an all dirt road, is that it's woefully unprepared to handle the volume of the potential traffic increases that won't start in a day or a week or a month. But as people realize there's a way to get out to Westminster from there, and I've lived in town too, I know for a fact that that is going to be a tremendous problem for anybody that's trying to, I guess, keep track of speeders. I mean, it would be difficult as it is now to get 2 cars to go past as it is now, let alone a tractor and a car. So I just wanted to bring up the safety aspect to it, because I definitely think that that hasn't even really been thought of, and it would need to probably at least be widened another 15 to 20 feet in order to be able to get the volume of cars that I think are going to be coming through there, especially on the Deal side that would lead to Westminster. Thank you.
The gentleman in the back.
My name is Philip Asler. I actually don't live on Deal Road, but I have property on Deal Road. I live on Heiser. But I farm that whole area along there. I run tractors up and down there all day long. And just like Joe said, it's not going to handle the traffic. If you're, I don't know how many houses is here, 400? If each of them have 2 cars and 10% of them go back Angel Road, that's 80 cars a day. We don't see 20 cars a day now. And it's just going to make it impossible for me with my livelihood and all. I just wanted to point that out, and I wanted to give a suggestion on the access to Angel Road. Could that be a one-way in with no exit? Just a thought. I know you need to get emergency vehicles in there, but they can go out another way. So.
Thank you.
Oh, I do want to point out one more thing. If you get a chance, go ride Deal Road one time. You'll go to the right. It's a 90-degree corner. I can't see with a tractor. It's woods right there. You can't see cars. You go the other way, there's a house sitting right on the road. So just go back there and you'll understand what our concerns are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Doug White. I live at 4225 Angel Road, which is right at the intersection of Angel and Deal. We've lived there 30 years. We've seen the stop sign at that intersection move in all 3 different directions of the road. And being next to that hairpin turn, being at that intersection, there can be a lot of traffic. When the road work was happening in town and some people found Angel and Deal to get back around to the traffic circle, it was dangerous. And there's been people who've gone straight through the end of Angel Road through Phil's fence, slide off that hairpin turn any number of times. So just want to point that out, that it really can't bear that traffic.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am?
My name is Ann Ness. My address is 4380 Angel Road. My farm is on the opposite side of the egress that everyone is talking about. It's a beautiful farm. It's a beautiful field. It's just wonderful. And what I can see is that a lot of people are going to be looking at my farm and saying, oh, this is a wonderful place to live, meaning the Meads Crossing. And they're not, I'm going to be thinking of the impact that townhouses are going to have on my farm. And I am not in ag preservation, but can I imagine the number of people that may be thinking that they have the right to take liberty to come crossing across Angel Road, that they can walk on my fields, that they can maybe do four-wheelers, that they can do anything, because it's a very remote area, because my house and my barn and my outbuildings are much further back and up Angel Road. So I was really surprised to find out that there was going to be this egress from Angel Road to Meads Crossing, because that has direct impact on my property. And one part of the email that Jim Thomas had sent to me, I don't have it right in front of me, and I can find it if you like, but that was also a major concern about what happens to the landowners that are on the other side. It's a farm. You know, are people going to appreciate private property? There's always a chance that they won't. And then how am I going to handle the repercussions of people's ideas of what they can just take liberty of? And that is a major concern. And I really am not for that egress. For the traffic, that's unbelievable. You know it's going to be worse. But also the impact that it's going to have on my private property. And I understand that Don Reaver is 4th generation. I'm 2nd generation. And so, you know, I have had a long tie in my life with the farm. And I believe and very strongly feel that this is going to have a major impact on my farm. And how am I going to handle anything that can happen as a result of all those cars coming in and out having free access? Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add one quick thing that Ann mentioned, Joe Betty, again, about quads and four-wheelers? She just brought up a good point that, and I see it down in the city, I've seen it on the news, that I can envision if you have even that egress there with the opportunity to have, if it's emergency vehicles, quads and four-wheelers and little, you know, motor scooters, I could just see that's their breakout point, and then basically it becomes the wild, wild west there with people just sneaking out there with their quads and motorcycles and just running havoc on the whole place. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Thomas, is there any chance we can get a copy of your presentation?
Yes.
I very much would like to have that. I couldn't, okay, I really couldn't comprehend everything you said tonight. It's just too much at once. So I would like the opportunity to have it. So, any comments from the commission?
Not tonight, that's a lot to take in.
It is, there's a lot, to take in, and we will take it in.
He really did his homework.
Yes.
He did his homework.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming out, presenting your case to us. And there again, we'd like to see you more often. So with that, Jim, you have any comments? With that, again, thank you. We'll give them a minute to clear out,
They
to
don't
leave.
have to
Then we'll
go.
leave. You guys can stay. I mean, our meeting's not over. You're welcome to stay. Ordinance and agreement for review, there is none. Jim, you want to do your report? Give me just a second to bring it out. Jim. Okay, yeah.
Okay. We talked about the Durborough property behind the funeral parlor on East Baltimore Street some time ago with regard to there being a crematory in the brick building that used to be the accountant's office. That concept is back on the table, except this time around it's going to be to demolish that building and start from scratch with a new building for a crematory. I had hoped to have that on for concept site plan presentation this evening, but when we got the plan in, there wasn't enough time to post the property with the required 14-day notice. So they have to wait until next month to formally present the plan. But it was in your packet, so you can familiarize yourselves with it. I expect there to be a somewhat limited review, or at least a lot of not applicable comments from the different review agencies, because we're looking at an area that's an existing impervious surface. Does not look like it's going to require stormwater management because of the existing impervious, and a number of, I think the only county ordinance that we've adopted that will apply will be the landscaping ordinance. So I think we're going to see a lot of comment letters that are no comment with the initial round, so hopefully it'll be a pretty straightforward process for this one. Let's see. We talked a little bit last month about the intent language for the downtown business district, and the current language, as we talked about, talks about generating low vehicular and pedestrian traffic. It doesn't really paint the same picture that I think our comprehensive plan and our Main Street group are really trying to foster for the downtown district. And it also doesn't really fit along with the list of permitted uses that are allowed in the district. So I provided some excerpts from the 2010 comprehensive plan and also the Main Street guidelines, and also an initial draft for some different language for that intent section. And I think that if we can come up with what the intent for the district is, that will kind of lead us in the right direction for any additional changes that we want to make to those district regulations. So I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about that maybe later in the evening. Just to kind of wrap up the rest of my report, the Ryan Home models, we finally issued the zoning certificates now that the stone base course is down, at least to the extent where those model homes will be. So they're down, and they've also followed through with the building permit applications at Carroll County for those 4. And efforts on the railroad crossing are ongoing. Jay is on vacation at the moment, so things have slowed down a bit with his absence, but some progress was made, and we don't have a final agreement with the railroad yet, but it looks like that's going to happen. There's still some insurance-related questions that the railroad has that we haven't, that I won't go so far as to say we have an impasse, but it's some stuff that our insurer doesn't really typically do. So we're going to have to talk a little bit more with the railroad about that one. So that's about it on Meads. And the Board of Appeals hearing for brewery fire was held on the 17th, and the special exception for the microbrewery was granted. It was unanimous. And in addition to that, the BZA entertained a request for reconsideration for the liquor store that was denied at their initial hearing at 226 East Baltimore Street, the former Sheetz site. So the board did vote to reconsider that case and hear additional testimony on it, and that hearing is scheduled for November 12th, which is Veterans Day. The office will be closed, but we are going to hold the hearing that evening.
Can we just back up to the brewery? I guess one of the things I was concerned about after was they didn't mention that they were going to have an outside garden to serve. Like when they came to us with the presentation, they said they would be having possible outside garden when the trucks would come up to serve the food, that they would have a place outside. Well, I guess I'm concerned that they didn't mention it at the Board of Appeals, because we're going to get that back before us again, right?
I wouldn't expect it to, because it's an existing commercial use, and I don't think the intensity of the proposed use is any greater than the intensity that the property had as a fitness center and bowling alley. Now, they were agreeable to doing something of a courtesy review to come before the board and share the plans and take suggestions, but as far as code requirements go, they will not be subject to a full site plan review, because it's an existing. It doesn't trip any of the threshold requirements for a site plan.
Well, my concern is that they're going to be serving alcohol outside the premises,
Right.
with no fence. I mean, when we have the activity down at the ball field, they're required to stay within the fence, and every other activity that has alcohol, they have to have it retain it somehow.
Right.
And yet this was not mentioned. And I'm just concerned that there's gonna be no requirement to keep the alcohol within a pertained area.
I think that that's also beyond the city requirement. I think that's also a state requirement for outdoor service like that. So we certainly will make sure that that's adhered to. But when we get a little farther in the process, I'll certainly keep the commission informed of what the plans are. And as soon as we have some kind of a plan for the space, I will bring that before you guys.
What I understood was anytime they left the property with the alcohol, it was in a sealed container. That was my understanding.
If they sell it to someone to remove, yes, but if they have entertainment.
If it removed
on
from
the-
the property, it's
Well, the property or
gotta
or
be in
the
a
or the
sealed
building?
container. That's the way I understood it anyway.
Well, my concern was that they're gonna be drinking it outside of the building.
I believe
And
they will have to have a fenced area for that, an enclosed area for that.
And I think one of the members mentioned about the driveway. I've traveled that about 2 or 3 times, and I really don't see an issue with traffic, because they have it marked on their parking area with arrows of traffic flow. So I don't see traffic flow really being an
They
issue.
got speed bumps too.
And yes, and they have speed bumps.
And they're-
So,
right.
as far, I think that was, Carl Weeball brought that up, but I don't see an issue there.
And while it may not be a requirement, if the property owner is, I know he indicated that they're gonna be doing some paving work in the not-too-distant future.
It's in bad
And-
shape.
And, you know, there may be something that he can incorporate that may better divert traffic to make sure that people don't just, you know, drive straight across the parking lot regardless of the markings, as I'm sure, see people do at shopping centers all the time. So there might be something he can do to make sure that incoming traffic is funneled to the right, you know, as they're supposed to. And the idea of removing pavement for like a little island there to, again, divert people to the right as they enter might be something that could be considered, but I'm not sure about the drainage. You don't want to also just create kind of a swamp either. So, but I think he's open to, you know, some ideas, but, you know, just to improve the flow of, you know, vehicular movement out there in general. So,
Okay, well, I support his business, so I'm in favor of that, like the council agreed upon. Just want to make sure it stays,
Gotta support some business.
that's right, we need business in the town. So, all right, that was the only thing I had. Go ahead, Jim.
that's really about the limit of my report this month.
We'll just go ahead and move on into the projects.
Alrighty, things have slowed down a bit at Meadowbrook as far as housing starts. But the developer is looking to do the wear course, the top coat of paving for Section 4B. They haven't hit the threshold for the number of units that have had use and occupancy permits yet, so they may not be able to pave before winter. The developer is hoping to get the pavement done so they didn't have to overwinter an additional year. And that of course has to do with when the surety is returned to the developer. So, you know, they would like to pave sooner rather than later, but the housing starts really haven't kept pace to meet the 70% threshold that we normally require before the top course goes down. So that's, and also with Meadowbrook, at the edge of Section 4B, there's been a bit of a drainage problem, and they're gonna be adding an additional yard inlet between 2 backyards. They've got some standing water issues out there right now, so we're reviewing and expect to approve a red line change to extend another storm drain line and put another yard inlet in to intercept a little bit more of the surface flow that will be off of, it's actually off of a future phase. but that'll be a small change. Nothing, you know, if you don't live in one of those two houses, nothing you'd really ever see. And the two property owners that are adjacent to it are actually requesting that the developer do something to try to help eliminate the standing water issue there. So just a few little things going on with that. Creekside, down to one punch list item. So they're getting very close. Let's see. Nothing really to report on the others. We talked a bit about Meads already, and the Tannery Barn is continuing to work on the exterior stuff at the site. They have not yet pulled building permits, but they have been in touch with the county about their next steps when they're ready to, when they're beyond just the property cleanup and some of the exterior work that they're doing now.
They're doing some grading outside though, right, out front,
Yeah, they've been working, I think they've
with nothing?
I think they've got the, well, they've got their permits for the site related stuff, but they haven't pulled a permit for the conversion to commercial yet. So, but they have been in touch with the county about what their next steps will be towards that end, so they are kind of chipping away on it, but still working on just inside the building, some more cleanup work and things like that on the first floor.
Barn's twice the size now.
Yeah. Can we jump to
It's a big
Evapco? Where are they at with the addition they wanted to add for that test? Remember the side, they wanted to add a section for testing or something?
Yeah, it was some sort of test tower.
This, Jim?
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
I don't have their permit information with me. I'll have to see where that stands. I know they applied for, and I would imagine that the permit is in the works. I don't know if they've got a use and occupancy on it yet or not, but I can check and find out. Any other questions on projects?
Any more on the Tannery Barn?
Pardon me?
Any more information on the Tannery Barn?
He just gave that.
They haven't started the official conversion to commercial yet,
Oh, okay.
but they have been talking to the county about it.
Any legal updates?
No, nothing this month.
Is Claire's not here? Yes, she is. Yep, sorry.
The Freedom Plan was adopted by the county commissioners on, I believe, October 10th. And one other update, the comprehensive rezoning, the industrial commercial employment campus tax is going before the commissioners, I believe, in November. And then residential tax should be introduced to planning commission sometime after the new year, so maybe January, the beginning of February.
Thank you. I guess you want to move into the other business, downtown.
That would be great. Any suggestions, criticisms, critiques, ideas? I guess the last sheet that was in your packet is has some proposed language as a starting point for discussion.
George or anyone have any comments?
Not at this point.
So our next move or next step on this is,
We can get a little farther into the district regulations. Again, I think that we just currently have kind of a disconnect between the intent and then the list of uses and what Main Street and the comp plan are trying to what they envision for the downtown district. So we can, you can mull that over for another month if you'd like, and, if anybody wants to, throw some revisions or some suggested language out, for next month, that's certainly fine.
Okay.
And while I'm talking about downtown business, jumping back to the crematory site, that small strip between Mill Avenue and the railroad tracks, we talked about this several months ago, was on the comprehensive plan to be, it was designated as downtown business, but when we did the zoning map, we missed it. So there's the Durborough property, the Hovermail property where the old mill is, and then two residential rental homes that are all currently industrial that were supposed to be downtown business when we did our last zoning map. So we're working with the county to get an updated zoning map that will reflect that change, as well as including the properties that have been annexed since the last zoning map was adopted. So hopefully we'll have a draft map before you soon that will have the change for Mill Avenue, plus the Stumptown Road properties that we annexed, and the Bollinger Park and Garrett property that we annexed off of Fringer Road, all incorporated as part of the city. So
Back to the mills,
And-
Mill Avenue, does that go back as far as the old Potomac Edison area? Or does that stop at the end of the mill? Do you?
I think the map
What's that?
change would stop at the mill property,
Mill property.
but I'll have to double check on that Pepco property.
I have a question while you're talking about that area.
Okay.
Is there an update on out there next to Havilah, that part where you're supposed to incorporate, or is,
Well, that was pretty
that
much
was a
dropped,
long
wasn't it?
time, that's never been incorporated yet,
That
has
was,
it?
that was annexed.
That was
but
annexed?
That was annexed, but the developer has not submitted a
He never
development
come back.
plan at this point.
That was
Okay.
quite a bit of issues. There was quite a bit of issues out there, wasn't it? With what he wanted to do.
He's changed it again.
The developer has suggested a number of different ideas, but hasn't formally presented any of them. The annexation agreement spoke to development being done under the community village designation, and also that it would be age-restricted homes, and I think that it was limited to, I want to say 50 dwellings. I don't have the agreement in front of me, so don't hold me to those numbers, please, but it did kind of pigeonhole what could be done on that property without going back to the mayor and council for a change to that agreement. So I know the developers come up with a couple different concepts and ideas, but nothing that he's really turned into a full plan at this point, or even a concept plan to come before the board.
Roughly how many acres was that?
5?
No, it was
No,
more
it's
than five. It was
larger
more
than that.
five.
It's
I was gonna say 20, wasn't
it's
it?
about 20, I
20
believe.
acres? And it goes down to the stream all the way, right?
No,
No, it
it
doesn't.
stops, the property owned by, and the developer has since sold the restaurant property at the time of annexation. He owned that, as well as the, I guess, 18 or 20 acres just to the east of it. So right now, the restaurant is under separate ownership, that parcel. So the Beam property is to the immediate east of that.
Okay.
And that's also the limit. There's one property, I think, beyond that within our growth area, but then the property that's the recharge property for the Bean property is outside of our growth area, and that's the property that goes down to Piney Creek.
George, you had a question?
Well, while we were talking about the crematory area, what can we do about the rear of the Robert Peters lot? Why don't we try to get that cleaned up back in there while we're talking crematory?
You have some, haven't you?
I don't know if you've been by there lately, but it has been cleaned up significantly
It's a lot better.
in the last couple
Completely?
of months.
It's getting better, yes, getting a lot better.
Well, but I mean all the way.
No, there's still 3 vehicles and 2 trailers.
There's still, I think, 2 vehicles that don't have tags back
Well,
there.
Why don't we get it cleaned up?
Getting a lot better.
Yeah, he's working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, he is.
All right,
Robbie's had some trouble lately,
yeah, yes.
bad trouble.
Okay, was that it then for you, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else from the floor? Yes.
Chris Tillman, George's on York. The draft language for the zoning code for the downtown business district, is that available for public comment?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Would you like me to read it?
I would love to, thank you.
Okay.
You can just email me a copy.
Okay. Alrighty.
Did I see another hand? Mr. Smith?
Yes, I'm Steve Smith with Meads Crossing, and I just wanted y'all to know that I heard every word, and we take it to heart. We're not, we'll work with you and work with the Planning Commission as we always have. We try to do well, it's not perfect.
George, you have anything?
No, nothing else.
I have nothing, sir.
Not.
No.
Jim? All right, looks like the next meeting is November 26th at 7:30, and you all are welcome. With that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So, I'll second.
Carried, thank you.